Wish you a happy Diwali to all of you. So here is a good news for you. We have this biggest Diwali sale, and only thing you have to do, you have to use this code JN Live. You can use this code JN Live so that you can get the maximum discount. And here we have this foundation course for your PCS batches, that is prelims as well as mains. If you want to have a comprehensive preparation, you can go for this. You have to use this code to get the maximum discount. So today we are going to discuss another chapter in our this series of cover topics with the help of previous year question paper, and we are basically targeting OAS Prelims, and we are discussing this prelims question of your from this previous year papers like from 2006 to till date 2022. So let's begin the discussion. Last class रे हमें discuss करिथिलु the money supply, monetary policy, inflation. In today's class, we are going to discuss fiscal policy. Before I go to the previous year question paper, let me introduce before you what is the meaning of this fiscal policy, how is it different from the monetary policy that we have discussed yesterday. Monetary policy, as we have discussed yesterday, was related to something this money controlling or money supply controlling measures. Yesterday we also have discussed that one monetary policy committee is there who is the final authority, decides the money supply or controlling measures, and in that monetary policy committee ame dekhtilu ki ko mane are the participant. Who are those participants? Sarkar, the government of India as well as the RBI. So how this fiscal policy is different? Fiscal policy, jodi ame dekhiba, when we say fiscal policy, then first thing that it should come to your mind that it's a policy by the government. It's a policy by the government. When we say policy by the government, that means government spends money. Government spends money for what? For the welfare activities. Welfare activities pai government kaun kare? Paisa kharcha kare, spend money or spend, let's say, resources. What kind of welfare activities? For example, those sections of the society, they cannot afford the basic amenities. For example, government is giving food grains at a very subsidized rate. Government providing housing facilities. Government कौन करुचे? Drinking water facilities भी provide करुची. Government sanitation facilities भी provide करुची. Then from where this government is like getting this so much of money that it's spending in the infrastructure facilities also. So the amount the government is spending, we can say that government expenditure, or what we call the public expenditure. Government expenditure or public expenditure. And another aspect, then my question is, from where does the government like getting so much of money? Government is collecting what? The tax. That is, you can say it's a kind of revenue or income of the government. It's a kind of revenue or income of the government. So it's getting, or the income is tax, and then there are certain income sources non-tax as well. ଯେମିତି ଆମେ tax କହିଲେ କ'ଣ ଜାଣିଛୁ? Direct tax ଅଛି, indirect tax ଅଛି. ସେମିତି non-tax ଯଦି ଆମେ କହୁଛେ, that is not a tax, neither come under the income tax, or that is the direct tax, nor come under this indirect tax. तेबे कौन ही पारे? फाइन ही पारे, फी ही पारे. So overall this is going to the government. तेणु government ର the income देखिबा हमें, revenue देखिबा हमें. So this is tax and non-tax, let's say. From there government is getting money and spending in terms of what? The government expenditure. So broadly speaking, now ମୁଁ କାହିଁକି ଏ ଜିନିଷ ଗୁଡ଼ାକୁ analysis କରୁଛି ଆପଣଙ୍କ ସାମ୍ନାରେ? Why I am telling this? Because if you say the fiscal policy, fiscal policy which is executed by the government or exercised by the government, it has two wings or two arms or two components. One component is what? Public expenditure. Another component is what? The tax revenue. Tax and non-tax, what we call, and the revenue. Now, how this, and combinedly you can say this is fiscal policy. And mind it or remember this thing, here RBI does not have any role. It purely exercised by the government. Now, how this combinedly or jointly exercised by the, let's say, government? If you have remembered the previous classes, if you have gone through the previous classes, I have told you that there is, we call business cycle. If you haven't seen, you can go to the previous videos, you can see. Business cycle. Business cycle means this is, let's say, the expansionary mode of the economy. This is what we call the boom. This is the slump. This is what I call the phase of recession. And this phase is known as the depression. If you draw a line like this, then this phase is recession, this phase is depression. Now, what government does? If economy is at a very rising stage, this phase, and it's going upward, that means government is expecting an inflationary situation. When the price level is about to rise. So what government wants to do? Government wants to control that scenario, because when there is a kind of a higher inflation, then government has to ensure that the real income of the people should not decline due to rise in the price level or inflationary situation. Kahinki mu last class re explain karithili ki inflation jodi ruhe economy re, if there is a rise in the price level, the real income always comes down, or income in terms of goods and services. ତେଣୁ ତାକୁ control କରିବା ହେଉଛି କାହାର responsibility? It's the responsibility of the government. So at the time of this inflationary situation, what government does? Government tries to reduce the public expenditure, because when public expenditure happens in the economy, more and more money goes to the people. So government reduces the public expenditure. On the other hand, what government does with the tax? Government increases the tax rate so that people have the less money, they can spend less. They will spend less, then only you can control the inflation. Let me repeat this. In an inflationary situation, what government kaun kare? Government jo public expenditure ta achi, public expenditure को कम करे, टैक्सेशन को बढ़ाए. काहेकि ना पब्लिक एक्सपेंडिचर को कम करिवार पर्पस होची कोन ना जते कम पैसा इकोनॉमी रे सर्कुलेट हबो, लोक माने सेते कम डिमांड करिवे और कंजप्शन ऑफ गुड्स एंड सर्विसेज कम करिवे. On the other hand, when this tax is increases or tax is increased by the government, people have again less money. People will have again less money, they will spend less. And to control this inflationary situation, suppose economy is at this phase, in a downward movement, or this phase, recession and then depression, what government will do? Government will try to inject money into the economy. Public expenditure will increase in the economy and tax rate will come down, so that people have more money, they can spend more. They can spend more money into the economy, or they can purchase more goods and services. So this is what we call the exercise of this public expenditure and tax combinedly or jointly by the government, which is known as the fiscal policy. So this kind of question generally asked in UPSC as well as the state services PCS जो आमर अच्छी सेठी पचरा जाए. तेणु you should be careful. कि इन्फ्लेशन समय रे टैक्स और पब्लिक एक्सपेंडिचर को कौन करा जाए इन्फ्लेशन समय रे जस्ट रिमेंबर दिस थिंग पब्लिक एक्सपेंडिचर को तुमको कम करने को पड़ो टैक्स को बढ़ाइबा पड़ो जिते डिफ्लेशनरी लेट्स से डिप्रेशनरी सिचुएशन इकोनॉमी इज इन डाउनवर्ड ट्रेंड से कौन करिया पड़ो पब्लिक एक्सपेंडिचर को बढ़ाइबा पड़ो टैक्स को कम करने पड़ो राइट लेट्स मूव टू द नेक्स्ट और क्वेश्चन FRMBA is the act related to what? So this is actually FRBM, not FRMBA, which has been misprinted. So FRBM. What is this FRBM? FRBM कौन? ना Fiscal Responsibility Budgetary Management Act. Fiscal Responsibility Budgetary Management Act. It was there in 2003. It was introduced, it was passed by the parliament in 2003. यार कामो कौन थिला? What is the purpose? Purpose is that fiscal discipline. Now question is what is this fiscal discipline? आपण गोटे छोट उदाहरण दोची from there you can understand. उदाहरण टी होची suppose वर्तमान रो गवर्नमेंट अछि वर्तमान गवर्नमेंट टू win the election or to get the vote government can spend any amount in the economy okay but suppose that government loses or even if that government wins for the next 5 years that government has to repay that money back in the sense that the government अधिका पैसा खर्च करूची is spending more money that means somehow government has taken from somewhere to spend this much of money कारण सेते तो रेवेन्यू नथिबो कोठी ना कोठी आपन को लोन करिवा को पड़िबो to spend that much amount of money then government has to do what again repay it back जदि से सरकार से पॉलिटिकल पार्टी गवर्नमेंट रे आसिलानी या सरकार गठन कलानी जदि अलग पार्टी के कला then that is again a burden for the another political party who has formed the government to repay that loan back to from where they have taken. तेणु ये जो जिनसटा को गोटे चेक एंड बैलेंस रखिबा पई to have a restriction to have a restraint on these kind of जेमती देखुथिबे फ्रीवी कल्चर बहुत चले छी फ्रीवी कल्चर फ्री रे डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन तेणु से जिनस से पैसाटा पुनी कोठो आसुची सम हैव दे माइट हैव टेकन एज ए लोन तेणु ताकू कंट्रोल करिबा पई 2003 रे गोटे एक्ट आसीथिला that is known as the fiscal to maintain the fiscal discipline objective कोन थिला the question is कोन is relating to what fiscal deficit revenue deficit primary deficit budgetary deficit answer को जीवा पूर्वरु let me tell you one thing what is this fiscal deficit fiscal deficit होची simply you can say that जो I mean the expenditure and the revenue amount the expenditure and the revenue amount of the government ता भितरे जमती किछि mismatch न हो imbalances न हो okay that is fiscal deficit and specifically this FRBM act is targeting this fiscal deficit and when we calculate fiscal deficit I think you know this thing यदि बजेट आमे देखिबा बजेट को आमे डिवाइड केमते करिचे बजेट को आमे केमते डिवाइड करू गोटे होची रिसिप्ट एंड द एक्सपेंडिचर रिसिप्ट इन द सेंस कि द रेवेन्यू द इनकम ऑफ द गवर्नमेंट आ गोटे कोन ना एक्सपेंडिचर यदि एक्सपेंडिचर रेवेन्यू टू अधिका हुए वी कॉल इट व्हाट डेफिसिट यदि रेवेन्यू इज ग्रेटर देन दिस एक्सपेंडिचर then we call it surplus तेणु यदि surplus रहे it's good for the economy but this is a rare circumstances this is an exception mostly you will find the deficit so to measure such deficit there are multiple types of deficits budgetary deficits जदि आमे देखिबा, budgetary deficit simply means the revenue is less than the expenditure. This is the budgetary deficit. Budget is in deficit. Budget has two components. What is revenue, out of expenditure. Revenue kono na income of the government. Expenditure, the government is spending the money. So the mismatch or difference is known as the budgetary deficit. And fiscal deficit means when we say budgetary deficit, that means in the revenue side which is less than the expenditure. Again if you see this revenue and expenditure is divided further, it has been divided. Under this revenue, again we divided into two parts. One is revenue receipt, another one is capital receipt. Revenue expenditure and capital expenditure. Okay, so these are different types of what we call revenue and this expenditure. Revenue receipt, revenue expenditure, capital receipt and capital expenditure. And in fiscal deficit, when we calculate, we although calculate the amount of revenue that government has taken or the income that government has gained or government has got, but in that calculation we do not include the borrowing part, because borrowing, although loan kariki tame paisa anucho, revenue anucho, but that is something a liability. So we have to deduct the debt or the borrowing with respect to the total what we call the deficit. So basically total deficit ru jadi ame borrowing taku minus kariva, then we got the fiscal deficit. Are you getting my point? So total deficit kono? Simply jota amara budgetary deficit ame koche. Revenue is less than the expenditure. Budgetary deficit, and say budgetary deficit ru jadi ame borrowing taku minus kariva. Kahinki borrowing taku ame kouthe include karu? Borrowing ta hoche amara revenue re jehetu include karuche, but that is not an asset. You have to anywhere repay it back, or government has to repay it back. So ame setaku budget deficit, fiscal deficit koito. Revenue deficit kono? A revenue account re revenue receipt, revenue expenditure. When this revenue expenditure is more than the revenue receipt, that is revenue deficit. Primary deficit kono? The fiscal deficit ru, let me answer this. Primary deficit, this has been repeated by the commission. Eta ko repeat kara jaiche question to apna dekhibe. Primary deficit kono? Na fiscal deficit ru jadi ame interest payment ku minus kariva, fiscal deficit minus interest payment, ame paiva primary deficit. Kahinki minus koruche? Na primary deficit ta hoji deficit in the current year. Deficit in the current financial year. Interest payment ta kono? Jo interest ame pay koruchu sarkar pay koruchandi, that is for the previous borrowing. That is for the previous borrowing. Could be last year or last to last year or previous 5 years also. So sethi pai current deficit या current year deficit जानिबा पई हमको primary deficit को calculate करिबा को पड़े. तो से primary deficit को calculate करिबा को हेले fiscal deficit रू जदि आपण interest payment जति की पे करजंदी ताको माइनस करिवे, तबे हमें पाइबा कोन primary deficit. माउथ रेट को रिपीट कर दोची फॉर योर क्लैरिटी. फर्स्ट होची कोन बजेट कहले हम पाखरे दीटा कंपोनेंट, गोटे होची इनकम जोटा के हम रेवेन्यू भी कहूचे, आ गोटे होची एक्सपेंडिचर. राइट, रेवेन्यू is greater than the expenditure, that is what we call the budget surplus. So the revenue is less than the expenditure, budget deficit. Clear? So budget deficit means revenue is less than the expenditure. And this also you can say that if revenue is less than the expenditure, then that is again the total deficit. जेमती आपन को कही बजेट रे दीटा कंपोनेंट गोटे हूँ रेवेन्यू आ गोटे हूँ एक्सपेंडिचर. फर्दर ये जो रेवेन्यू टा डिवाइड कौन होची गोटे हूँ रेवेन्यू रिसिप्ट आ गोटे हूँ रेवेन्यू एक्सपेंडिचर. सेमती कैपिटल रिसिप्ट एंड कैपिटल एक्सपेंडिचर. तो ये बजेट डेफिसिट को आम टोटल डेफिसिट भी कही था. प्रथम कथा. द्वितीय कथा हूँ कौन फिस्काल डेफिसिट आम केमती कैलकुलेट करवा. ये जो टोटल डेफिसिट अच्छी से आम कौनटा माइनस करवा द बोरोइंग और द डेप्ट. थर्ड रेवेन्यू डेफिसिट कौन ना रेवेन्यू रिसिप्ट माइनस दिस रेवेन्यू एक्सपेंडिचर. रेवेन्यू रिसिप्ट माइनस दिस रेवेन्यू एक्सपेंडिचर, दैट इज रेवेन्यू डेफिसिट. प्राइमरी डेफिसिट कौन फिस्कल डेफिसिट माइनस इंटरेस्ट पेमेंट. कहीं ना इंटरेस्ट पेमेंट हूँ पुराना लोन रो इंटरेस्ट आपण पे कर. क्लियर. चलंतु आगू बढ़िबा. Tobin tax. Tobin tax is what? Now, Tobin tax hoji, you can see this. Tobin tax is a tax on international financial transactions. International financial transactions, that is short-term foreign exchange transactions. Foreign exchange transaction kono? Foreign exchange transaction hoji, for example, suppose but individual, if that individual exchanges domestic currency into the foreign currency, that individual exchanges domestic currency into the foreign currency. What is the meaning of that? The meaning is, suppose you exchange rupee against the dollar. For example, suppose $1 equals to 80 rupees. Clear? So if you, this is the exchange rate. So upon the dollar upon darkar, then you have to exchange what? The amount of Indian rupee you have to exchange. Now, many investors are there. सेमाने कौन करंती? Speculate करंती. इस speculate माने कौन? Speculation माने होची kind of probability, or you can say you are guessing something. Speculation generally हमें financial market रे use करो. Someone is speculating that price of the price of Reliance company share will increase in near future. You are predicting something. तो किसी investor माने अच्छंदी से माने कौन करंदी? Suppose से माने expect करंदी कौन ना in near future this exchange or this exchange rate will increase. Exchange rate will increase means से माने कौन predict करंदी जो $1 जो 80 टंका अच्छी वर्तमान that could be 90 in near future. 90 in near future. So what they do, से माने suppose 80,000 देगी 80,000 से माने देगी से माने कौन कले अराउंड $1,000 से परचेज कल $1,000 they purchased, right? And when this will happen, the exchange rate will come to 90 rupees. They will give rupee, they will get dollar. So that means they will gain something around this 10,000 rupees. Are you getting my point? Let me repeat this. Suppose exchange rate hoji $1 80 rupees. There are few investors who predict, speculate that in near future $1 equals to 90 rupees. So what they will do, they will start purchasing what we call dollar at the current exchange rate. So jadi in near future exactly this will happen, they will gain the profit of this 10,000. तेणु जेमती गोटे स्पेकुलेटर ए काम करुची, similarly other speculator will do the same thing. Automatically the demand for dollar will increase in the market. The demand for dollar will increase in the market. So the basic economic mechanism is what? When demand for dollar will increase, price of dollar will again increase. That means definitely this will happen. That means domestic currency will depreciate and foreign currency will appreciate. So definitely this will happen. They will gain what? This 10,000 rupees, could be more than that, by exchanging dollar into Indian rupee. So what government thought? Government thought we have to check on this, we have to restrict on this, we should have a regulation on this. If the speculation acts in the market, there could be a possibility कि exchange rate fluctuation हेई पारे in the market. तेणु सरकार चाहूँचंती ताकू कंट्रोल करिवा पाई. तेणु सेति पाई से स्पेकुलेशन उपरे गोटे टैक्स बसेवा स्टार्ट कले, टैक्स इंपोज करिवा स्टार्ट कले, जहाँ को हमें कही थो टोबिन टैक्स. नाउ जो टैक्स इंपोज करा जाउची दैट इज ऑन द ट्रांजैक्शन टैक्स. बेसिकली जेहेतु ये टैक्स टा जो इकोनॉमिस्ट डेवलप करथिले, नोबेल प्राइज विनिंग इकोनॉमिस्ट, ताका ना होची जेम्स टोबिन. 1972 रे सेटा को इंट्रोड्यूस करथिले. कोन ना डिस्करेज शॉर्ट टर्म स्पेकुलेटिव ट्रेडिंग इन द फॉरेन एक्सचेंज मार्केट्स. तेणु जे स्पेकुलेशन फल रे जो फ्लक्चुएशंस होची, अननेसेसरी फ्लक्चुएशंस, ताकू कंट्रोल करिवा पई ये जेम्स टोबिन गोटे टैक्स इंट्रोड्यूस कले, जहाँ को हमें कहूँ कौन ना टैक्स ऑन ट्रांजैक्शंस हमें ताकू कही थो. एंड इंडिया सिमिलर काइंड ऑफ टैक्स यूज करे, इंपोज करे, जहाँ को हमें कौन कहूँ सिक्योरिटीज टैक्स, सिक्योरिटी ट्रांजैक्शन टैक्स. एंड इंडिया इंट्रोड्यूस्ड इन 2004. I hope it's clear. Okay. Repeated question. If interest payments are subtracted from gross fiscal deficit, the remainder will be your gross primary deficit. कहीं ना प्राइमरी डेफिसिट द्वारा हमें करंट ईयर रो डेफिसिट अमाउंट को जानी पारू. कहीं ना जो इंटरेस्ट पेमेंट से इनक्लूड होगी था ग्रॉस फिस्कल डेफिसिट, से इंटरेस्ट पेमेंट माइट नॉट बी ऑफ दैट करंट ईयर. दैट इंटरेस्ट पेमेंट कुड बी ऑफ द लास्ट ईयर, मे बी द लास्ट ईयर. तेणु पुराना लोन रो हमें इंटरेस्ट दे चली था. से पुराना लोन ता माने कौन? से पुराना लोन माने दैट अमाउंट शुड बी कैलकुलेटेड इन द दैट प्रीवियस ईयर. तेणु से पुराना लोन को हमें डिडक्ट कले करंट ईयर रो नेट केते डेफिसिट अच्छी ताको हमें जानी परिबा. सेत पई हमें ग्रॉस फिस्कल डेफिसिट रो जो इंटरेस्ट पेमेंट हमें दउचे पुराना लोन रो, पुराना बोरोइंग रो, ताको माइनस कले विल गेट दिस व्हाट? ग्रॉस प्राइमरी डेफिसिट. क्लियर? I hope I have already discussed with you revenue deficit, like revenue expenditure, which is greater than the revenue receipt. Capital deficit, the same thing. Capital expenditure is greater than the capital receipt or capital revenue. Budgetary deficit is the total deficit जहाँ को हमें कोई तो the expenditure minus the revenue receipt. Okay. So GST bill, goods and services tax. GST is known as the indirect tax, and before it we had this VAT, which is value added tax, जोटा कि गोटे indirect tax ही थिला. तापर हमर इंट्रोड्यूस कोना में कलु GST, that is goods and services tax, the same indirect tax, which came into implementation for the 1st July 2017. Bill number 122, Act number 101 or 123. I mean, they are simply asked what was the bill number, because अपन जानी थिबे जे पार्लियामेंट रे बिल जो इंट्रोड्यूस हुए ता नंबर गोटे थाए, जेतबेले सेटा एक्ट रे कन्वर्ट हुए, काहेकि सबु बिल गुडा को पास हुए नि. तो सेतपै you will find the difference of numbers. तेणु किंतु GST रे this is the answer, bill number 122 and act number 101. Okay, chalo. Which of the following items does not come under the GST in India? GST रे आपण जानिथिबे जे बहुत गुडे प्रोडक्ट अछि जोटा कि GST रे एपर्यंत इंक्लूड करा जाय नाही. ओके, इंक्लूड करा जाय नाही. That has been kept exclusively for the state governments. ओके, जेमति कि लिकर प्रोडक्ट भी जोटा अछि सेटा आज पर्यंत भी सेतरे VAT इंपोज करा जाउची. VAT is imposed. Semti, if you see this options, then obviously this petroleum products are kept outside this GST. Okay, इत्ते पर्यंत GST रे सेटा इंक्लूड करा जाय नाही. There could be a possibility future रे हेई पारे किंतु वर्तमान पर्यंत हेई नाही. इटा क्वेश्चन पचरा जायथिला. Okay, now come to this. With reference to GST, which of the following statements are true? तीनटा स्टेटमेंट अच्छे एंड दिस इज द 22 क्वेश्चन लास्ट अक्टोबर रे जो एग्जाम हेतला तार क्वेश्चन एटा पचरा जाउची कि जीएसटी इज बेस्ड ऑन ए सिस्टम ऑफ concurrency of indirect taxes. Yes, of course, we know this. It's a part of this indirect tax regime where every transaction attracts central as well as the state GST. Definitely. So, अपना restaurant देखंतु अपना एनी सच टैक्स जो सर्विस नियंतु या प्रोडक्ट आपण परचेस करूचंदी सेतरे अपार्ट फ्रॉम दोज हैव बीन केप्ट आउटसाइड जोटा जीएसटी रेजिम रे अछि सेठी स्टेट एंड सेंट्रल लेवल ले इंपोज करा जाउची. सेकंड होची जीएसटी रिप्लेस्ड ए प्रोडक्शन बेस्ड टैक्सेशन सिस्टम बाय कंजप्शन बेस्ड टैक्सेशन सिस्टम. वी कैन से yes. We can say yes. Why? Because जो previous regime रे हमरा कोन थिला value added tax. Value added tax माने खोजी कोन ना at each stage when value is added tax impose करा जाउथला. At each stage of the production process when the value is added the tax is imposed. But in the GST this is imposed at only one place. And that is known as the destination based tax. Destination based tax in the sense जो स्टेज रे सेटा कंज्यूम करा जिवो सही स्टेज रे ही टैक्स ता इंपोज करा जाउची. तेनु सेटा डेस्टिनेशन बेस्ड टैक्स और जहाँ को हमें कंजप्शन टैक्स भी कहूचे. राइट, डेस्टिनेशन बेस्ड टैक्स और कंजप्शन टैक्स भी कहूचे. Earlier was the production based tax and this is known as the destination or consumption based tax. Okay, third, it brings destination principle for cross border trading for which the poorer and consuming states are benefiting at the expense of more affluent and industrialized ones. Now this statement is again correct. I mean first is correct, second, third be correct. Now question is why this statement has been correct or why this statement is correct. Let me give you one example. Suppose Gujarat where a factory has been set up, a product is produced in Gujarat, but that product is sold in Rajasthan or that product is consumed in Rajasthan. Then the tax will not be collected in this state, rather in this state. Consumption label or what we call the destination based. So, सेइतपै से कहूची Gujarat is an affluent state, is good for industrialization process and all, but tax सेठी कलेक्ट होनी से सरकार को किसी भी टैक्स सेठी मिलुनी. से टैक्स कोठी मिलुची राजस्थान गवर्नमेंट को टैक्स मिलुची where this product has been consumed or where this product has been destined. It is a destination based tax. So here tax is collected by the Rajasthan government, not the Gujarat government. Okay, so this all three statements are correct. Clear? So this is all about from I mean on this topic fiscal policy. So Do watch our sessions and you will have a thorough understanding of different topics and different concepts as well. Please like, subscribe and share, and we'll come with new topics in this series of cover your topics on previous year question paper. Okay, so till then, thank you once again. Happy Diwali to you and your family.